What is up, guys? Teddy Cornwell here. Welcome to the Underdog Talk, the world's most underrated podcast on earth. Today, we're joined by the man behind RX Muscle, Species Nutrition, the one and only Mr. Dave Palumbo. What is
Well,
up there? How you doing today?
doing great. Thanks for having me on, man.
Hey, thank you for coming on. And as I was telling Dave, obviously Underdog Talk started as a bodybuilding podcast. And we had all those guys, and we're looking to get back into it. So no one better than Dave, the man behind RX Muscle. Now, Dave, would you mind telling us a little bit how you got into bodybuilding? Obviously, we did our research, and bodybuilding wasn't your first sport, right?
I played soccer in college, and then I was running also. Soccer would be like in the fall season, and then I would do like track and field in the spring. And then going to my senior year of high school, I actually had my appendix ruptured that summer, and I couldn't do anything contact wise. So I decided to run cross country that year, which is cross country is like a 3.5 mile race through running through woods and shit like that. And I had been running like the half mile in track, and I said, so I got kind of bit by the endurance bug. Getting endurance running and bodybuilding are very similar. It's a very addictive type of thing. And so I started running like 3, 5, 7 miles a day. And, I got into the whole running thing. And then when I went to college, and I actually had some pretty good times in track, good enough for Division III at least. And so I got some money from Franklin and Marshall College, which was kind of a pre-med factory, which I was going to for that. And then I was running on their team, and I was like basically starving myself to, keep my weight down because, for running, you don't want to weigh extra, even if it's muscle, you don't want to carry around extra weight. So I kind of was I was in it was kind of like the opposite. It was like the anti-bodybuilding like sport, trying to get as small as possible. And I had lifted a little in high school, so I had some muscle, and they were like, you're carrying around all this extra muscle. So for 3 years there, I really, focused like obsessively on running. And then I realized I'd probably never get a date again if weighing 140 pounds. So I started working out in my senior year, right before I was heading into medical school. I'd gotten into medical school, and I put on like something ridiculous amount of weight, like 60 pounds or something like that, just from not starving myself and just from weight training and eating properly. And I loved the fact that my body was changing so drastically. And like we all do, we get bit by the iron bug. And I didn't even know anything about steroids at this point. This was just diet, nutrition, supplementation. I was actually doing I think it was my junior year of college, I did a internship over the summer with one of the professors who was studying thyroid hormone and muscular development in chickens. So we were dosing these chickens with all different levels of thyroid hormone and seeing how it affected their muscular development. And forget about it. I was so intrigued by hormones and how all that worked. And like I said, I really knew nothing about steroids at that point. I just knew that I liked the whole idea behind hormonal manipulation and food manipulation and supplement manipulation and being able to change how you looked. And that got me, that bug bit me. I wanted to see how I can change my body.
And it's damn addictive. And who were some of your kind of early influences, Dave, that you kind of got into the sport looking up to? Obviously,
Right.
would it be a Flex? Would it be a Kevin? Who would it be for you?
Well, I think initially it was Lou Ferrigno. I was the guy who watched Pumping Iron and was rooting for Lou. I didn't even know Arnold. I didn't know what the outcome was. I was young. I was really young when that movie came out. And then I watched him in The Incredible Hulk, and I was fascinated. I wanted to be the Hulk so bad. Like there was nothing that I wanted to be in life more than the Incredible Hulk. I even painted myself green, like for a couple, Halloween costumes, over the years, when I was younger. And then, ironically enough, I actually got to be the Hulk on the Conan O'Brien show about 5 or 6 times. It was in a comedy skit type of situation, but they painted me, and I was, this is when I was, almost 300 pounds. And so I actually got to play the guy I was, trying to emulate my whole life, which was kind of funny. And I'm actually really good friends with Lou Ferrigno, which is just bizarre when you think about, that was your idol growing up. But once I got into bodybuilding and was competing, the guy I was looking up to, I guess, was Dorian Yates. Ironically, Kevin, I'll tell you good Kevin Leroney story. I've told the story before, but it might be worth mentioning again. In 95, Kevin Levrone came to the Junior Nationals. He was backstage because he lived in the area. It was Washington, D.C. And he saw me backstage. I'd won the heavyweight class of that show, and I was ridiculously shredded, about 258, I think I weighed, which not many amateurs, I don't think any amateurs weighed that much back then. And he was like, how the heck did you get that shredded? And meanwhile, I'm thinking to myself, this guy is unbelievable, And so through a mutual friend, he contacted me and wanted me to help him get ready for the Arnold Classic in 96, which I thought was for me, that was like the highlight of my life. So I drove down to Maryland, and I've told the story before. He about 6 weeks earlier, he had sent me pictures in the mail, because remember, there was no cell phones or anything like that. So he had mailed me some pictures, and he looked like he never lifted a weight in his life. I said, what happened? I called him on the phone. He's like, well, I haven't trained in like 5 months. I'm like, you look like you haven't. I mean, he was nothing. He's like, but and so I gave him a diet on the phone, and I gave him, I told him what I wanted to do. We talked about drugs and stuff like that. And so 6 weeks later, I drive down to Maryland with a friend of mine, and we get to his house, and we're bullshitting. He's showing me his house. He had a beautiful house, and he was showing me the Flex magazine covers he was on and everything like that. And I'm like, let's see what you look like. And when he sent me the pictures, he weighed like 240 or 235 or something like that. It looked terrible. Look at you. It wasn't even hard. He takes off his shirt, and he's like, his shoulders, triceps. I was like, you know what? And I was 300 and something pounds at this point. I said to myself, I didn't say it out loud. I said to myself, I should just quit now, because I'll never beat this guy ever. I said, this guy is another human being. He's like an alien from another planet. I said, I couldn't even believe how good he was. So I never was able to emulate. Like, I never looked at Kevin and said, I want to be Kevin Levrone, because I knew I could never be Kevin Levrone. But I would look at Dorian Yates, and I would say to myself, that guy works hard. That guy is yeah, he's got genetics, but it's the work ethic. And so I always kind of looked up to Dorian Yates' work ethic: less sets, less volume, smarter training, higher intensity, full range of motion, eat a lot of food, And so I think that was the guy kind of I wanted to emulate. And when I saw he was the first guy to really get to a relatively solid 300 pounds, I said, if he can do it, I can do it. Yeah. And so that was really my impetus to really push myself.
One of the first years you not the first heavyweight. And obviously, Dorian, if you're watching this, we know you follow us on Instagram. You followed us first, but come on the podcast, man. And obviously, shout out Kevin, who's on the podcast. Yeah. And Kevin actually only lives about 10 minutes away from the studio. So, we're.
Oh, you're in Maryland? Okay.
Yep, Maryland machine. So Kevin and Levrone, the guy.
Kevin is, I'll tell you something about Kevin, because Kevin and I have a long relationship. After that show, there was a little disconnect. I think Kevin was, his head was in the clouds, and he, about 6 months later, he'd call me and apologize, because and ever since then we've been very close friends. And he's the kind of guy that if he finds out that you're going through a tough time in your life, he'll just call you up and just see how you're doing. Hey, Dave, it's Kevin. Hey, what's up, Kev? What can I do for you? He goes, no, I'm just calling to see how you're doing. I heard you're going through some tough times, whatever, or maybe something, when I had the aorta surgery, he called me up. He's just a very thoughtful person. And, if he's friends with you, he cares about you. And it makes him special. Look, we all, at some point or another, sometimes we get a little full of ourselves, and we think that, we are who our body is and everything like that. But he's just very grounded. He's a very grounded guy, and he's very successful at everything he does. And he's a good guy to have in your corner, because he's very loyal. And so I'm kind of proud to call him a friend. He's a good guy. He's one of the good guys in the sport, I got to tell you.
He definitely treated us with respect when we started out as a brand new podcast. And he reminds me a lot of Derek Lunsford in that humbleness. And Derek was on the podcast actually a month before his first Mr. Olympia in the Open, and one of the most genuine, kind, sent us a shirt, and so many people in the bodybuilding industry, like you, Dave, are just so humble. It's such an amazing industry, and I'm really excited to get back into it and kind of explore it again. And what were some of the challenges, obviously, from shifting from cross country to bodybuilding, like you talked about? That's a completely different. Obviously, training's different, diet's different. What was that like for you to add from 140 like you were to that 300 to 25 range?
The discipline is the same.
Mhm.
But in long distance running, overtraining is like a part of life. Runners train every single day. They never take a day off. So for bodybuilding, you have to learn, it's like controlled fury almost. You're, you give a lot in the gym, but then you have to recover. And I had to learn that, because when I first started training, I was training 7 days a week. I was training each body part twice a week. And I was doing way too many sets because I had the runner's mentality, more is better. And I had to learn that that's not the case. So that was a very big adjustment for me. Um, but I'll tell you this, the one thing that I loved about bodybuilding was, number one, I hated the fact that I had to run no matter what time of year it was. So in the summer, when it was blasting hot, I was almost naked. I was in these little tiny shorts, dripping sweat, running. And in the winter, I would be running in the snow. So I hated the fact that the elements were there. Also, because I was always starving myself, I was always deprived. I would drive by McDonald's and all kinds of donut shops, and I would want to go in there and eat everything inside. I had a borderline eating disorder from that, because, and every once in a while I'd go crazy and binge and eat everything in sight, and make myself sick. So I liked that bodybuilding was, it's almost too hard. It's hard. Like, most people can't eat enough food. I had such an insatiable appetite from running that the 6 meals a day was easy for me. Matter of fact, I was doing 8 meals a day, and then I realized also that my metabolism was so good that the more I ate, the bigger I got, really. And I know it sounds weird because most people get fat. I couldn't get fat. It doesn't matter how much I eat, I don't get fat. So the more food I can get down my throat, the bigger I would get, assuming I was training properly. So I like that. I like the fact that, I had this gift that, the more I got down, the more muscle I put on and the stronger I got in the gym. So once again, learning that transition of more is not better, but doing the right amount in controlled doses is going to give you the best results in bodybuilding. And to this day, it's the same thing. People can ask me, what's the success of bodybuilding? I'm like, doing the same thing every day and just repeating it over and over and over again. But you have to know what the right schedule is for your body. For my body, less volume, heavier weights worked really well with a lot of food. Other people don't need to eat as much food, and they may need to do a little more volume, you know what I mean? And a little more frequently, depending on their metabolism. So you got to kind of find the formula that works for you,
And we're kind of like opposites. Obviously, I was never as good of a bodybuilder as you, but I did it. I did cross country as well, and I would eat everything during cross country. But during
Yeah.
body, my diet was so strict that it did lead to me seeing anything and wanting to eat it after, and that was definitely something to deal with. So it's the complete opposite. Now, obviously,
Yeah.
as I mentioned, your first competition was 1990. 1990, right?
I'm going to take you back one minute. I'm going to say, when I would run, you want to know, I'm going to tell you my eating schedule.
Okay.
So I would go and I would have like a breakfast, like maybe like a couple, like 2 or 3 eggs at the meal hall. And then for lunch, I would have like tuna with vegetables and a salad. And then I would go back to my room and I would sleep for like 3 hours before track or cross country practice, sometimes 4 hours. And then I would get up and I would go to practice and run where we ran 10 miles, 7 miles, interval training, whatever we did. And then I would go to dinner at the meal hall, and I would have like a sensible dinner with maybe a little pasta, some carbs after that. And then I would go back to my room and I would eat all night long till the minute I went to bed. So while I was studying, I would eat. I would eat bowls of cream of wheat, cream of rice, oatmeal with raisins in them, and I would drink a gallon of milk every day with the thing. I didn't even know I was lactose intolerant. I looked like one of those Ethiopian kids, the starving Ethiopian kids. My stomach was like all ballooned out, probably from all the gas from drinking a gallon of milk every night. And it didn't matter how much food I consumed, because I was under eating the whole day, and I was way over, exercising. And that was my schedule of eating, and it was so dysfunctional. It's like it's sickening when I think back of what I was doing, because I didn't know what I was doing. There was no one had any information on diet or what you should be eating. The other kids on the team were eating like their parents fed them when they were in high school. They were eating macaroni and cheese and shit like that. I'm like, that's crap. I just knew intuitively that was crap. But I was afraid to gain weight. I was really afraid to gain weight. So
And it just kind of brings me on. Speaking of the Olympics, we had Ryan Lochte on the podcast, and
Yeah.
he's talking about how, get someone who's been there before, and that kind of just, what you're talking about, Dave, especially in the sport of bodybuilding, get a coach to really assist you with.
I wish there was a coach then. Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously, kind of going back to that 1990 was your first competition. What were your emotions going into your first show ever, and what was the prep like for that?
It's funny because I was only training 8 months for that show. That was the year I graduated college. So I graduated in May. The show was like in June, and I had a guy at the local gym who was helping me out, diet and stuff like that. I was all natural for the show, and I weighed in at 168 pounds. I'm about 5'10" and a half, so that's pretty tall. I was shredded. I had striated glutes, all natural, but I was, and the guys backstage, it was funny because I think I came in 6th place. I didn't place. It was, but the guys who beat me were all like, 5'5" and 5'6" and stuff like that, probably shorter than that. And they're all like, "Man, you're really lean. You just need more muscle." And I'm like, "I know. I've only been training for like 8 or 9 months. I was a runner before this," and they couldn't believe it, But you could see, you could tell that if I put a lot of muscle on, that I would look impressive because I had crazy striations like everywhere, even like I said, all naturally. And I tortured myself for that. I hated that diet. After the diet was over, I said to myself, I'll never compete again. I said, this was the most miserable thing I've ever. I thought that starving myself for running was bad. That this was worse because it was like I was eating little small meals all day, but nothing that really, satisfied me. And I said, you know what? And I remember the guy who was dieting me. He said, "You'll do it again." He goes, "Once you start eating, you'll forget." And he was 100% right, of course. But at the time, I said, "No, I will never do this again." I said, "This was the most miserable thing I've ever gone through." And look where I am now. I competed probably 20 more times after that. But the first one's always the worst,
And Rich Gastori would always get on me because I called it styrations instead of styrate or whatever the hell it is. So I just add to it. And obviously, you are such a prominent, voice in the bodybuilding.
Mm-hmm.
I want to look at current bodybuilding. Obviously, you've been able to see it kind of progress. And I always love to ask this question: do you see bodybuilding going in the correct direction in terms of becoming more popular? Which we can definitely say it is. But do you just see it going in the right direction?
Yeah, I think anytime the sport grows, it's in the right direction. So I think what people they just like to try to find patterns and things, I think, and that's just human nature. And I think the problem with that is that different generations of people have different talent pools. So sometimes when the talent pool is not so good, people say, "Oh, bodybuilding is going in the wrong direction." But it's really not. It's the judges can only judge what's up there.
Mhm.
Like there was before we got Derek and all these guys coming in. There was a little when at the end of Phil's career, it was a little stagnant for a while. Yeah, you had Roden come in there, but there wasn't a lot of depth because all the guys were older, And then after that, you got this whole new crop of young guys that came up, and now it's a lot better. So that's just the way it works. Everything works in cycles. So we're definitely moving in the right direction. The guys are getting better. There's, better information out there, coaching, better, the internet is a wonderful thing. It's a terrible thing. It's a wonderful thing. There's a lot of information. It's a terrible thing because you don't know what to believe. But I think there's enough knowledgeable people out there like myself that are passing off good information on the internet so that people are learning how to do things at an earlier time where before it was kind of just locker room talk. So yeah, I think we're going to see in the future, we're going to see much better physiques. There's other divisions now. Like people think, well, people are not going to do bodybuilding now because there's classic and there's this and there's that. No, I don't see that. I think that people are using classic. They're using men's physique as a stepping ground or stepping stone to get to the higher divisions in certain situations. In other situations, someone might just happen to fit really well in that category and they stay there. But I think that these other categories are not going to replace the men's open. So the sport is growing. The prize money is growing. We're seeing $100,000 now at the Dubai show. I believe within the next 5 years, we're going to see $1 million first place at either the Olympia or the Arnold. So I think we're moving in the right direction. And once the money gets to a point where it's that high, you're going to get a lot more people going into bodybuilding because they're going to say, "Oh, look, there are actually rewards now." I mean, why would you go into bodybuilding if you can make, you could be the worst player in the NFL and you can make, 10 times what the best bodybuilder makes. So you're not going to do that. But when the bodybuilding, prizes go up and it becomes more money becomes available, I think that entices a lot more people to enter the sport.
And I think that open again. We had Keon on the podcast. He talks about he's going to go to the top open on his own, and I think the open
He should. He should.
He should, and he was telling me he wants to do it on his own. But the open is kind of what you said, the gem and what attracts people to bodybuilding right now. And obviously, we have CBum and people who are bringing that attention. Who are the young guys in the bodybuilding industry right now who are bringing that hype, bringing that noise, and bringing that popularity back to bodybuilding?
Which competitors specifically, you mean?
Who are the overall competitors? Obviously Derek and CBum, but who are the other names that are, people are kind of, who are bringing the popularity back into the sport?
I think there's always new upcoming guys. I mean, Andrew Jack to me is the most exciting guy because this guy's made some incredible improvements, and we're going to see him in Texas next week, and I think he's going to shock a lot of people. Obviously, what's his name? From England. What's his? Why am I missing? I'm forgetting his name. What's the black guy from England's name?
He's about. He was on the podcast, Nathan Diasha.
No, not Nathan.
I
think third in the world. Why am I blocking his name out for some reason? Having an Alzheimer's moment.
Oh, you're talking about Samson. You're talking about Samson.
Samson. Thank you, Samson. Sorry, Samson. I just had a mental. Samson Dowda is added a lot of excitement last year. I think this year we're going to see a lot from Andrew Jack. Derek is super young. Hottie looked insane at the Arnold. I think there's a lot of excitement in the open division. You still have Hunter Labrada, who hasn't really, found his perfect niche yet for himself. I think he's an exciting guy because he's still young. There's a lot of good talent in that division that I think we really haven't seen the people reach their pinnacle of their peak of their career yet. So because everyone's still young. Remember, guys usually hit their peak around mid 30s, late 30s, and that's when they're their best. So these guys are still in their 20s. A lot of them, some of them are in their early 30s. These guys are going to be around for the next 8-10 years. We're going to see some battles ensuing, and we're seeing it seems like every year we get new guys coming up too. So I see the talent pool definitely improving every year, and we're getting more depth. But you got to remember, back in the day, we got one USA champion, we got one nationals champion, and we got one North American champion. Nowadays, we get a lot of pro cards are being given out, hundreds of them, if I probably calculate correctly. But it doesn't matter. If we get 2 or 3 good guys every year, like we got in the past, we're still keeping par with what it used to be. So that's all we need. At the top, there's only one group of top 6 or 7 or 8 great guys in the world. To break into that top group, you have to be super good, And so, like I said, you don't need to have a lot of new talent every year. You just have to have new talent every year. And I think we have had new talent every year.
And I think one name, obviously he was injured, but Nick Walker to be added to that list as well for that young talent.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but he's also super young. So all these guys are going to be around for a very long time, and that's what makes it exciting. Whereas in the past, we were dealing with guys that were aging and they were really just kind of holding on to the end of their career there. That's not the case now.
And, I do have to ask your professional opinion. Obviously, Derek won, but who did you have personally winning, the 2023 Mr. O? Was it Hottie or Derek for you, sir?
I had Derek winning because I thought he won from behind, and I think that set him apart from everyone else. However, if Hottie looked like he did at the Arnold this year, and I was there in person, right, and interviewed him, if he looked like that at the Olympia, I think he would have beat Derek. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this year. The good thing for Derek is he had a whole nother year to grow and improve. I don't think Hottie's getting better in terms of size. I think he's getting his conditioning gets better and worse. See, what Hottie's problem is that he can be a little off and be a little bigger and still be harder than everyone else. But when he comes in at his best conditioning wise, no one can match that. So I think that's his forte that he has to bring to the stage. The question is, will Derek improve enough to be better than Hottie, in terms of size and roundness and stuff like that? So that's what we're going to find out. If he has not improved enough, then I think Hadi could regain the Olympia crown, which is exciting when it goes back and forth. No one wants to see the same guy win every single year, and I think these guys are all so close to each other that it's going to be a battle. Personally, I don't think Nick Walker could beat either one of those guys because I think those guys structurally are better than him. But I think he'll definitely be a top 5, contender for sure.
And it's kind of going back to the popularity where it's bringing that attention to the sport with how exciting it's getting, Dave. And Underdog Talk, we are in talks with Hadi, and we're back in the bodybuilding industry, and he might be coming on the podcast sooner than later. That's all I'm going to say. But obviously, RX Muscle, I want to talk about that because that is such the main news for bodybuilding. Where did the idea for RX Muscle come, into fruition, and how did that all start, Dave?
Yeah, a guy had approached me back in about 2000, and he said, "I want to start a magazine, a hardcore bodybuilding magazine, and I want you to, be the editor of it." And he said it was called. He called it RX Muscle because the RX is the prescription sign, and he wanted it was called the Prescription for Hardcore Muscle. That was their tagline, and I said sure. And he had hired a bunch of guys. He was paying them money. Craig Titus was one of the guys he was paying actually, and these guys were just taking his money, and nothing was getting done. So me being the doer that I am, once he got me involved, I said, well, we got to get this magazine out. We got to do something. So I started working on this thing, and I had a website built. I had at the time I was dating this girl. She did websites, and the guy he was like a steroid dealer who was making good money, and then he stopped doing it, and he kind of lost interest. He said, you know what, Dave, I feel like I strung you along. I'm just going to give you the whole project. So he gave me the website that he had, and he gave me the magazine because he had never paid me. And I just took it over. And so I printed a few we had a few copies out there. They were really good. Remember, this is before the internet was big, really. So magazines were still huge. And then Steve Bleckman hired me to write for Muscular Development magazine, and then ultimately to start their website and to be the editor-in-chief of that. And he said, you can't do both. And I said, all right. So I kind of put the RX Muscle project on the back burner and stopped doing it. And I ran Muscular Development for 2006, 7, and 8. And then in 2009, when John Romano and I got fired from Muscular Development because we still don't know why we were fired. I said, what are we going to do? And I said, well, I have this RX Muscle website and this magazine. Why don't we just relaunch the website as a similar to what we're doing with Muscular Development? And we became their number one, competition. Everyone kind of followed us over there, and the rest is history. Obviously we won the battle because Bleckman went out of business just last year. But it really was a passion project, and luckily for us, we had a lot of support from supplement companies right from the beginning. I know Arthur L. Ray, may he rest in peace, at ALRI supplements. He was sponsoring us. There was something called Alchemy was sponsoring us. And they were the first 2 people to really believe in us. And once they did, other companies came on board, and people saw the passion behind what we were doing. We were having fun. We were covering competitions. And once again, this was before YouTube got big, and supplement companies didn't know where to put their money. They knew they had to put them online, but they didn't know where. There was no Google ads and stuff like that. So they were paying us advertising. BSN, my relationship with BSN was very good and the guy who was doing the marketing with them, Brendan Ahern, who now owns Ronnie Coleman's Signature Series with Ronnie Coleman. That's how I met him. And they were spending a lot of money with us advertising. And then when Brendan left, and then started Ronnie Coleman's Signature Series with Ronnie, I've been friends with them for years because of that. So that's how the whole thing got started. But we kind of changed our business model a lot because initially it was all contest coverage. Then once NPC News kind of launched their own online website, and I realized it was really costing a lot of money to travel to all these shows and do all this coverage, I said, you know what? I think the next big thing is going to be TV programming. And no one had a bodybuilding TV program at all. There was some podcasts. A few people had podcasts and audio podcasts. We had obviously ours, but no one was doing TV. And we were the first people to do TV. John Romano built us a studio in New York, and we did heavy muscle TV for years, ahead of everyone else. Anyone was in the New York area, they would come into the studio live, and we would do these shows. And They were very popular. So that was always something I wanted to do. And I always wanted to do original TV programming, not just reporting on what other people are doing, but I wanted to do our own like type of stuff, like Iron Debate I do Ask Dave, and we do now we're doing different podcasts too, with like Lee Priest and John Romano, and we have the Whack Pack show, which is the after hours. So I wanted to do unique programming, like have our own TV station. That's really what my vision was, and that's really what it is right now.
And obviously, shout out Lee Priest, and he hated us until he came on the podcast. Now we're cool. But obviously, are there any future projects that are coming for RX Muscle that are in the development? Like obviously, you talked about the podcast you do with Lee. Is there anything else in the works? More YouTube? Is there anything else in the works for that?
One of the things I pride myself on is that I'm able to change and evolve. And which is ironic because my nutrition company, Species Nutrition, it's called evolutionary nutrition. Because I believe that you could have one belief system now, but that you can change that belief system according to how the trends of what's going on in society. So you have to kind of anticipate the trends, and we've always been able to do that. And even if I don't anticipate it, and I see something changing, I have no problem going to that place and giving people what they want. I think a lot of people get locked into a rigid way of doing things. They can't evolve. Like when I was working with Muscular Development, I told Steve Bleckman, the publisher, I said, Steve, we have to develop TV programming. I know you get the idea of having a website and reporting on shows, but eventually no one's going to care anymore, because I said social media, I saw the whole rising of Facebook and everything, and I knew people were going to use social media to catch results of contest tests. And I said, we're going to be a moot point. We have to have TV programming. And he just didn't see it. He's like, there's no business model. I said, but we're going to create the business model. I'm telling you, it's going to be about TV programming. And he couldn't see them. He couldn't see. So in essence, by him firing us, he actually did us a favor, because he allowed me to go do what I know needed to be done. Likewise, when social media became very popular, we had to then focus on the YouTube channel, because we used to host all our own videos on rxmuscle.com. I didn't host on YouTube, but when I saw that there was a business model there in the sense that we can monetize videos, everyone seems to go to YouTube to watch their videos. They don't want to go other places. We had to go there and do it, and that was fine. And then when Instagram and became popular, we needed an Instagram presence, and so I hired my social media guy Sid, and how great we're doing with him now. So you have to be able to anticipate the trends and go with it, or you die. And in this day and age, and I think this is important for anyone looking to start a business, if you're not willing to change with the times, you're going to go extinct very quickly. It's not like the old days where it takes 10 years to go out. You go out of business in a month, in a year, very easily, if you don't keep up with what's going on. So you can't be rigid in your thinking, and you have to be able to constantly keep saying, well, what can I do that's different? So when you tell me what's the future of RX, I don't even know. Whatever it needs to be, whatever people want, I will give them, assuming that it's the truth and it's my truth, and I'm going to do it in an entertaining way, and that's just my personality.
And obviously, Muscular Development cannot evolve, and they're no longer with us. So I guess at that point,
they went extinct.
They did go extinct, to your point. Now, obviously, RX Muscle is so big in the bodybuilding community. What do you want the impact of RX Muscle to be in terms of the world of bodybuilding, Dave?
I think that one of the things that I pride myself on, I guess, and that's what RX Muscle represents me in essence, is that number one, we tell the truth, okay, whether you want to hear it or not, okay, whether we offend you or not, or whether it's popular or not. Number two, okay, I'm a big information provider, so I like to teach people stuff. I'm not one of these guys that I'm keeping all the secrets, and if you want the secrets, you got to hire me as your coach. That's not who I am. I'm all about spreading the information we have to the community in the right way, so that people can do things the correct way. Look, I know people are going to take performance-enhancing drugs. We all know that. People are going to compete in bodybuilding. You're not going to ban these things, okay? So let's teach people how to do them the right way and to do them the responsible way. And as I've gotten older, I've evolved the stuff that I'm teaching according to what I've experienced. So when I go through if I get high blood pressure, for instance, or if I have a surgery, now I have insights that I didn't have before about, what you should look out for. Hey, you better get a cardiac CT scan so you don't have a heart attack in the gym, whether you don't have an aortic aneurysm like I do and you don't know about it and you wind up dead like what happened to Boston Lloyd. Likewise, you better check your blood pressure, because if you don't, you're going to lose your kidneys. And there's a lot of bodybuilders who've lost their kidneys, right? And they didn't, because they weren't checking their blood pressure. My newest thing is blood sugar control. We know that now high blood sugars not only obviously cause diabetes, but you can actually cause dementia long-term. So these are all things I'm constantly educating people on. And I think that people know that if they go to RX Muscle, the information they're going to get from me on there is going to be science-based. It's no bullshit, and it's not done because of marketing purposes. I'm giving you real information. If you want to take that information and you want to buy my products that I make, then that's great. But the information is not based on the fact that you have to buy my products. And so that's something that I think people, trust. I have a lot of trust. And you know what? From day one on the internet, I've been on the internet since the 90s, okay? From day one, I never charged. I always answered everyone's questions. I never charged a penny, to answer people's questions, because I knew that by doing that, people would trust me, and they would know that, hey, you know what? Dave's really got our best interest at heart here. He really wants to educate us. He really wants us to do things the right way. And you know what? Because of that, I'm going to buy his supplements to show him support for that. And you know what? And everyone knows that I make the best supplements. They might not be the cheapest supplements because they are high quality, but they know I make the best supplements. So everything kind of feeds each other. If I can make a good living doing what I love on a daily basis, which is an information provider and making nutritional supplements, then I got the best job in the world. There's no reason for me to lie to people. There's no reason for me to try to, maneuver them with marketing techniques or anything like that. I'll just tell them the truth. And then if you want to buy my stuff, that's great. And that it's worked for me. It hasn't made me a billionaire, but it's made me a good life. And I think that I feel good, I feel good doing that on a daily basis.
And obviously, nutrition has taken off, and it like you mentioned, high quality blends is what it's known for. Obviously, it's worked by you. How hard is it to manage both RX Muscle and obviously have a supplement brand as well?
Well, I don't do everything myself. I'm the kind of I always say I'm the front guy. So I'm the guy that does, the TV shows. I'm the guy that does, all the education stuff. I'm the guy who formulates the products. I'm the guy who explains how the products work. But we have a team of people, for marketing. Not a lot of people. It's this very small crew. We have, my soon-to-be ex-wife runs the back end of the company, processes all the orders. My Sid does all the social media for me. I have a webmaster, and we have a species, social media guy, my guy Umberto. So we don't have this, and Chris Aceto, of course, John Romano, the whole crew of people, talent, Jimmy the Bull, all the people on our podcast. But it's a very tight-knit group of people, and people I trust and I'm friends with to do the daily duties. I find that if you keep things smaller, okay, you'll make more profit, but your gross might not be as high, but your take home is higher. And so that's really been my business model. Once you get something too big and grows too big, you lose control of it. And now you're depending on other people to do the job. And sometimes when that happens, you can be disappointed. And I've seen that happen. I've made that mistake before. And I find that when I keep things a little tighter, it works better for me. And that's just been something that I've noticed. So I can't take credit for running the whole operation. All I can take credit for is being front man and helping to educate people as to what's going on RX Muscle, and then obviously helping to sell my products, because through the education that I do.
And first 5 people who follow RX Muscle will send you one specimen product of your choice from the Underdog Talk funds. So we'll make that happen now, Dave. Before we let you go on, RX Muscle, who are your top 5 for the Mr.Olympia Open in 2024?
That's a tough decision. Obviously, Hadi and Derek are going to be in that group. I would say Samson and Andrew Jack are in that group, and probably Nick Walker. Now, I know I've left off a lot of people, but those are just the obvious choices. We call them the usual suspects. I mean, there's so many other good guys that could break into that top group, But if you're a betting guy, you have to go with the usual suspects, because those are the guys that have been at the top of their game, for quite some time now. And I just, I don't see that a reshuffling of that mix right there. But there are guys that are nipping. Let me ask you this question: What would be your top five?
I actually, as we had Andrew on the podcast, and I wouldn't put him in my top five right now. I would still have, you said Nick, you said Samson, you said Derek, Hottie. I agree on that. I think we're gonna have a fifth person that might just break out onto the scene. Some names that come to mind and people might go crazy, but Martin, Nathan. Obviously we saw Martin be able to compete with Nick. I think if Martin,
I like Martin a lot. Yeah, I like Martin. I have him in the top fifth or sixth spot right there.
Okay, yeah. I guess, if Andrew Jack comes in at how he normally does, I think his posing is beautiful. I think he's brilliant. I would say Hunter at five. I think this is Hunter's year.
I think that I think that Andrew Jack is going to shock people this year. I've seen some pictures of him from Chris Aceto, and this guy is way better than last year. And don't be surprised if he. I don't want to get. Whenever I make these bold predictions, I'm always wrong. This guy, put it this way, this guy has the tool set to win the Olympia. Whether he will or not is obviously, until we see him standing next to those other guys, is a different story. But he definitely has the tool set to win the Olympia. I don't know if he's got it up here mentally to do it, but he has the physical tool set for sure.
And I guess my final one, if Big Ramy does return, which he is returning, right?
I don't know. He wasn't in Pittsburgh guest posing, so I don't know. I know he said he was going to, but we haven't heard anything from him, so I can't imagine him getting on stage at the Olympia. But who knows?
Well, if he hypothetically,
I don't think he'll make the top five.
Wow. Yeah, I put him in my top five just because you can't sleep on the champ or the former champ. But I like your top five now. Before we go, the floor is yours. Where we can find all your social media, RX Muscle, Specimen, all that, Dave.
Well, for the nutrition company, it's speciesnutrition.com, spelled like the shirt.
Was I saying Specimen? I meant Species. Yeah. Sorry.
You're good. Speciesnutrition.com is the nutrition company. RxMuscle.com, obviously, or the RX Muscle YouTube channel for all our content. We have the RX Muscle YouTube channel, Instagram channel. My personal channel is Huge285. And if you guys want to see my snake collection and all the reptiles that I breed, Palumbo's Pythons on Instagram, and the Muscle Serpents University YouTube channel has all my snake stuff. I actually even have an aquarium fish channel called Muscle Fish, and that's mine. And it's funny because I used to have a lot of fish tanks back in the day in New York. I had a 650 gallon in my office actually with these big, they call monster fish. It's kind of like big rammies swimming around in a fish tank. And I used to put all these videos up all the time, just right from my cell phone, no editing, nothing. And these videos have millions of views because people love to watch fish tank videos. It's a big thing to do. And so it's funny because the fish tank channel, I don't even put any content on it, and it grows exponentially every day. It's the craziest thing of all time. And meanwhile, I'm working my ass up on these other channels. They're growing. They're slowly growing. The fish channel, I don't put anything on. It's just millions and millions of views on all these videos. It's very, very funny because they're timeless essentially. Because people want to see big fish, they're going to watch the channel. So that's I don't. You asked me the question, how do you have the time to do everything? I'm a very good time manager. I have good time management. I work all the time, but I'm never working. People say, you don't have a real job. I said, yeah, I don't have a real job, but all I do is work. Checking text messages, emails. How many social media accounts do we have, right? You got to check PMs and this and that. And it's like an OCD brain overload. In order to go to sleep at night, this is what I do. I'll leave you with this. Let's say it's 1 a.m. and I'm done for the day. I'm not answering another email. I go sit in front of the TV. I'll put on like Netflix or something like that, whatever series I happen to be watching at the moment. Right now, I'm finishing up the new Cobra Kai series. And I'll sit on the floor and on the carpet, on the rug, and I'll stretch. And I stretch out because my I always tell people, if you want to live a long time, you got to stretch. I stretch for about 15 minutes while I'm watching TV. I'll do some abs while I'm watching it. Then I'll have like a final meal, or maybe sometimes like a Quest cookie or something, maybe my Pro Delice pudding or something like that. and then I'll take my Somalize for the melatonin, and I go to bed. If I don't do that little protocol, I can't turn my brain off. So for people out there who have trouble sleeping, I'm telling you, stretch, watch something that has nothing to do with bodybuilding, take something with melatonin like my Somalize product from Species Nutrition, and then after about 20 minutes on the melatonin, after it's been kicked in, you go into bed and go to sleep. Do not watch TV in bed. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
You watch TV in the living room, you don't watch in your bed, you sleep in your bed. And I'm telling you, you'll never have a better night's sleep. You'll never have trouble sleeping if you do that.
Well, I know who's
That's my protocol.
I know whose melatonin I'm buying right after this podcast. And guys, all of those links will be in the bio. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on this video. Until next time, Underdog out.